West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
On Capitol Hill today, the Justice Department, as it really exists for those of us here on Earth 1, came crashing up against the fictitious alternate reality of a supposedly weaponized Justice Department, the one of Earth 2, on which today's Republican Party lives. Attorney General Merrick Garland was before the House Judiciary Committee, which is, of course, chaired by Ohio Republican Jim Jordan. In his opening remarks, Garland reiterated the independence of the Justice Department.
Our job is not to take orders from the president, from Congress, or from anyone else about who or what to criminally investigate. As the president himself has said, and I reaffirm today, I am not the president's lawyer. I will add, I am not Congress's prosecutor.
Now over to the news on Earth 2. Republicans made it clear even before the hearing started, with members telling reporters that nothing Merrick Garland could or would say today was going to satisfy them, that they would peddle all sorts of conspiracy theories. Republicans accusing the Justice Department of going easy on President Joe Biden's son Hunter, who currently faces a rarely used and constitutionally questionable gun charge. It was brought by a Trump-appointed prosecutor who was given special counsel status by, wait for it, Merrick Garland. But the fix is in, is what Jim Jordan had to say, even as Garland said over and over and over again that there was no interference in the Hunter Biden case.
Has anyone from the White House provided direction at any time to you personally or to any senior officials at the DOJ regarding how the Hunter Biden investigation was to be carried out?
No. I'm going to say again, determination of where to bring cases and which kinds of cases to bring was left to Mr. Weiss. This investigation was being conducted by Mr. Weiss, an appointee of President Trump. You will, at the appropriate time, have the opportunity to ask Mr. Weiss that question.
That declarative, definitive answer wasn't enough for Republicans. One Republican member went so far as to suggest that Merrick Garland should be held in contempt of Congress. In response, here's what a Democratic member of the committee, Congressman Eric Swalwell, had to say.
That is quite rich, because the guy who's leaving the hearing room right now, Mr. Jordan, is about 500 days into evading his subpoena. About 500 days. So if we're going to talk about contempt of Congress, let's get real. I mean, are you serious that Jim Jordan, a witness to one of the greatest crimes ever committed in America, a crime where more prosecutions have occurred than any crime committed in America, refuses to help his country, and we're going to get lectured about subpoena compliance and contempt of Congress? Jim Jordan won't even honor a lawful subpoena? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? There's no credibility on that side.
Merrick Garland also had to swat down right-wing conspiracy theories, including the notion that DOJ is targeting people of faith.
Attorney General, Through the chair, I ask you, do you agree that traditional Catholics are violent extremists? Answer
I have
the
no
question.
idea what the traditional means here.
Catholics that go to church.
May I answer your question?
Yes
the
or no?
idea that someone with my family background would discriminate against any religion is so outrageous, so absurd.
Mr. Attorney
It's hard to
General, it
even
was your
answer
FBI that...
The gap between life on Earth 1 and life on Earth 2 on full, glorious display today at a hearing about the Justice Department on Capitol Hill is where we begin with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. From the New York Times, Washington correspondent Mike Schmidt is with us. Also joining us, former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the U.S. Department of Justice, Mary McCord, is here. With me at the table, former chief spokesman for DOJ and former senior advisor to AG Garland, who is bursting with analysis, Anthony Coley's here, and former top State Department official during the Obama administration, MSNBC political analyst Rick Stengel's here for the hour. Anthony, the floor is yours.
So this was Spicy Garland, and I'm glad the public got a chance to see that. This is what we call him when he show up at these types of at meetings at DOJ. What was so important here is that I think what animated him the most are these attacks against DOJ prosecutors and agents. Nicole, I remember when I was at DOJ, there were two moments in particular that moved the Attorney General. The first was when he had a phone call with the family of George Floyd after that first federal indictment. But the second concerned a conversation about the security of DOJ personnel. And what we've seen in recent months since I've left is even an increase in uptick of those threats, and not just against prosecutors and agents themselves, but also their families. So what we saw today, I think, was an attorney general that was frustrated, really, with the downstream impact of these spurless charges from Republicans.
So you put it on the table, Spicy Garland. I think my gut might have been to call that an oxymoron, but I'm going to let you prove your case. Let me show some of this. This was Attorney General Merrick Garland being asked by Congressman Nadler about the dangers of defunding the Justice Department. Let me play this first.
Defunding the FBI would leave the United States naked to the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party, to the attacks by Iranians on American citizens and attempts to assassinate former officials, to the Russian aggression, to North Korean cyber attacks, to violent crime in the United States, which the FBI helps to fight against, to all kinds of espionage, to domestic violent extremists who have attacked our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, and who have killed individuals out of racial hatred. I cannot imagine the consequences of defunding the FBI, but they would be catastrophic.
Pretty straight talk there.
Really straight talk. And in many ways, what we saw were different conversations, Nicole. Mm-hmm. These people were talking past each other. What Richard Stengel and I were talking about earlier is that in many senses, in one sense, you have the Attorney General talking about criminal investigations, not just in this clip, but throughout the hearing. Criminal investigations begin with facts, and the facts tell prosecutors where to go. What we see on Capitol Hill are quite different with political investigations. With political investigations, members of Congress start with the end in mind, and then they try to fill in the facts to prove their narrative. And so that's what we saw throughout this hearing. We saw crazy things, crazy notions of Republicans suggesting that defunding the FBI is the right way to go. But none of this is the appropriate conversation that this country should be having right now.
Well, it's not the conversation that the whole country's having, Mary McCord. It's the conversation happening on Earth 2, which is where the MAGA Republicans live. I want to show you a little bit more about what Merrick Garland had to say about who the real victims are of this deep state conspiracy.
Does the rhetoric regarding the Biden case have any basis in reality?
No, it does not.
How does this impact FBI and DOJ employees' ability to do their work? I think you mentioned specifically FBI and DOJ employees.
As I've already said, the agents of the FBI and the prosecutors understand that criticism comes with their job, and they will continue to do their jobs without fear or favor. But the idea of threatening their safety or that of their families is just abhorrent.
And yet, Mary, that's where we are, with an unprecedented threat level under which FBI agents are working. Those working on the Hunter Biden case have a unit that has been erected inside the FBI to protect the FBI from those threats. An unprecedented threat level against NARA, against the IRS, against DOJ, and an unprecedented amount of money being spent by members of Congress to protect them from these threats. What did you make of this part of the hearing today?
So I had two takeaways. One is that, and we've talked about this before, I mean, this used to be the party of law and order, right? Respect for the FBI, respect for the Department of Justice, respect for the rule of law. And that just seems to be out the window. But maybe even more startling than that is the types of questions and the types of rhetoric-filled dialogue that many on the Republican side of this committee were directing, those questions they were directing to Merrick Garland. Many weren't even questions at all. They're just rhetoric and commentary. They sound so much like what I see from researchers who spend their time in the online extremist milieu.
Wow.
Conspiracy theories, nods to violence, of course, on those online, in that online space, the talk about violence is much more direct than some of what we saw here. But it's almost like the members of Congress are just careful enough to stop right before that last sentence or that last phrase directing violence. But everything that is animating extremists online and agitating them toward violence and saying things that are very, very clearly threatening and violent, it's the same thing you're hearing here. Conspiracies about the Hunter Biden investigation, conspiracies about the Trump investigation, conspiracies about the FBI staging January 6th. It's just lies, and it is just of a piece. If you could put these things side by side, the kinds of things that get sent to me, like I said, from online researchers in these forums that most of us have never even heard of before, unless you do this kind of work, it's the same thing you're hearing from people like Jim Jordan.
It is Thursday, the 21st of September of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special, daily special Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Just a little, okay? Fret not. For those of you who can take a little bit more spice, well, there will be some available because it's all there is. And those of you who can't take all that spice, well, it's just a little, okay? All right. How are you today? We survived another onslaught of constant gish gallop Nazi propaganda. When I say Nazi propaganda, I'm talking about from the Republican Party, which I have gone ahead and renamed the Nazi Party. I have attempted to call it the American Nazi Party, but there already is one, and they are even more Nazi than the American Nazi Party. The Hammerskins that were busted in Germany that we mentioned, had a read yesterday on. Yeah, raided homes and compounds across 10 German states. Yeah. The modern Republican Party, the MAGA Republican, the MAGA Nazi, the Nazi Party here in America is more Nazi than even the Hammerskins. Yeah. But it's okay. They wear suits. All right? A dapper Nazi is still a Nazi. All right? Liberal in a hoodie? I don't know. It looks scary to me. Ought to shoot him. That's what Nazis say. I'm just saying. Okay, well, did any of you in your wildest dreams think that when we were growing up, landing on the moon, bringing people back, even when there were like catastrophes on the way there and on the way back, we brought them back? Yeah, we had some tragedies and stuff when we were doing transport. Let's be clear about that. Like driving a truck. At some point, you're going to get a fender bender or worse, a jackknife. And so, we used to, we had that whole future ahead of us. I mean, we were going to be landing on Mars, probably even terraforming it, somehow regenerating its magnetosphere so it would ward off cosmic rays so we could have, again, life on Mars. Otherwise, it's just going to be stripped of all life unless you can burrow under the ground somehow and live. My idea of, intelligent life usually doesn't include mindless microbes. But hey, life is life, right? Be happy with what you got. Anyway, we had that whole future ahead of us, and did any of us at any point think that we would have all these Nazis also? Gee, some of us did. But I gotta say, even those of us who might have considered it a little bit, never thought we'd have these many Nazis. Jeez. So yeah, I've gone ahead, and it will be reflected in the Netroots Radio Style Manual when referring to MAGA Republicans. Henceforth, they will be known as the Nazi Party. Okay? Since Nazis like to appropriate everything, we're just going to appropriate the whole Nazi idea because if you read Hitler, most of it originated here with our own homegrown eugenics movement. And our genocidal extermination of the American Indian, the indigenous tribes that populated this whole continent. I'm just saying. Nazis didn't have an original idea. They had to appropriate everything, even the swastika. Well, if they're going to do that, we're going to go ahead and appropriate the Nazi Party and assign it to MAGA Republicans. All right? And I'm not just saying that it's just MAGA Republicans. It is the Republican Party, henceforth known as the Nazi Party. Since my middle name is Justice and my first name is Royal, I decree it. All right. I'm tired of being a temporarily embarrassed poet, philosopher, king. It's about time some law was laid down. Ugh. I feel like that guy from San Francisco who, God, all of a sudden I forget his name. He's very famous. He's a folklorish type character who... Admiral something or some other, and he wore this like wild like Napoleon type hat and the big frock coats with the epaulets on the shoulders, the whole deal. Said he was like king of the Bay Area or king of San Francisco. Small-minded poet, philosopher, king, I should mention. Anyway, it's about time that we start pushing back a little bit harder against these Nazis. Now, I have to admit, I don't see the constant deluge of propaganda on most of the other platforms. I can't speak to Tribal, and I can't speak to a few others. But I can speak to Mastodon and Spoutable and Blue Sky. On the shitter, Musk's platform, it is a constant deluge of Nazi party propaganda. Gish gallop of it. AI generated, I don't know, homoerotic adulation of Donald Trump. It's really weird. Sometimes posted by ladies. One, Bridget Gabriel. How much are these people getting paid? Well, we know that Leonard Leo and some of these other Nazi billionaires who are funding this whole effort. Let's not kid ourselves. This isn't the Republican Party coming up with this. They get marching orders. None of them have an original idea. They have to look to their betters. And their betters have lots and lots and lots of money, so therefore they must have the secret to the universe. So we have to listen to them. Then they blame the Jewish guy, George Soros funded. Yeah, well, I wish. Holy hell. We're not anti-Semite. Yes, you are. And you're Nazis to boot. Yes, as we get closer to Friday, I figure, well, you might as well get a few more minutes on these sermons that just happen to pop up. And for good reason, too. Jeez. All right. Why don't we calm down? When I say we, I mean in the royal we. I don't mean you. Jeez. Okay, I'll take responsibility. Why don't I calm down? And center myself. Take the proverbial deep calming breath. Right down to whatever chakra is at the extreme that has to be calmed down too. And delve into the curated part of the show because, well, that's how we center ourselves to the furthest reaches of whatever chakras we might have, ignored. You don't ignore it for long. That's how chakras work. Anyway, what do we have here in the Bistro Cafe? All right, I got to mention at the top, yes. I just sometimes love putting these curated texts together, explaining what we're going to have in store for the show. And at the top, yes, a witness to one of the greatest crimes ever committed in America, who has defied a congressional subpoena for almost 500 days, threatened Merrick Garland with contempt of Congress for not being a bootlicker. There's punishment to be had if you don't, bow and bend a knee and express fealty and lick the boot. On the rest of the menu, a progressive group is planning a $10 million investment in left-leaning school and library board candidates for the 2024-25 election cycle. Look, we got to run for dog catcher. But what they are doing to the libraries in America, and we're not talking about school libraries to protect the children from the scourge of sex while they're out there giving hand jobs to everybody under the sun. Or even under the roof of a theater full of families and kids. Yeah. I'm all for kink, but you don't do it around the kids. Call me a square. Anyway, they have flooded the zone. There are places where there is nobody running against these MAGA Nazis. So we have to run, especially for libraries and school boards and whatnot there. Because now they're going after public libraries. I just read a report that the public library system has seen like a 1,200% uptick in book bannings at public libraries. Give me a break. Then you got this guy running for office with a flamethrower burning books and reveling in it. Look, I'd much rather see Fetterman in a hoodie than, the Nazis in their hoodies. The pointy white kind. All right? Let's make sure we run for them. Okay, what else do we have coming up here? Oh, my gosh, yes. One of only 4 black mayors in the whole state of Oregon has resigned, claiming he was bullied out of office. And I got to say, the excuses that the other city council members and the former mayor who ran the recall that forced him pretty much out of office, pretty much saying he's just an angry black guy. All right. And even though California enacted sweeping legislation nearly a decade ago, thousands of drinking water wells could run dry in the Central Valley by the time the law's restrictions take full effect in 2040. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the president of South Korea warned Russia against any weapons collaboration with the North. I think that's a little late. And India has moved to ensure more equal representation by reserving 33% of the seats in parliament and state legislatures for women. Try that here and see what happens. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, off to the right of the page, is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so, and so much more. Across the page to the left from that chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln is the link to our Patreon page, and do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and I'll tell you why, because the bills never go down, unfortunately, and we do need your help, and we are so thankful to those of you who have. And how have they helped? Well, they've sent us what they might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, and they send those funds to us once a month, and then we pool those with other like-minded Patreons, and then that puts a big dent in the bills and other costs incurred in running this powerhouse of resistance. And I gotta tell you, there's gotta be a lot more resistance here, and we're doing our small part, and we do thank you for, well, really allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. Okay, tagline done there. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, I think we're on Blue Sky. I'll talk to Tom about that. We should be. You could do so at Netroots Radio, and as I just referenced there, Tom takes care of those and a lot more as well. And thank you, Tom, for all of that. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook. I'm not on Threads. Maybe I'll get there. I'm on Instagram. Anyway, you can follow me on most anywhere out there in the world as Justice Putnam or at Justice Putnam. And I post the show notes and links diary, incidentally, 10 minutes before showtime, so that you can peruse at your leisure before, during, or after the actual articles in which we draw so much inspiration from. And if you follow my social media feeds that I mentioned there, you'll have quick access to those actual articles through the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes. It is a diary. All right. You can also follow the show on Twitter. Yeah, it's not X. Sometimes it'll be shitter, with the X pronounced SH. Zitter, Maybe. Anyway, it is Twitter to us. It always will be. Also, you can find us on Mastodon, Spout. No, you can't find the show on any of those others yet. But you can on Twitter at Cookbook West, and probably on the other platforms as soon as I get it together. I'll get it, the actual name closer to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Okay. Now, of course, please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found, just not on Stitcher. And to those of you who have inquired about the block of David Waldman and West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy somehow being transmitted by Sirius XM, who I gotta say, I've kind of badmouthed quite a bit because of what they did to Stitcher. Damn them. Anyway, we're still looking into it, and I don't know. Probably in the form of pods and, somewhere in their news cycle, or I don't know, do they just allow people to pick them up out of the air? That would be nice. Play them in the car. Well, you can do that also. You can have Netroots Radio playing whenever in your car with Bluetooth by going to netrootsradio.com, where we do have a live player. And what we have programmed is being played 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 a year. Yep, that's what we do. All right, enough of this. We better get into the actual, articles that have inspired us so much here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And this first one is out of the Daily Beast by Kelly Weil. A progressive campaign group is getting in on school board battles with a goal of an 8-figure war chest for the hyper-local races. Run for Something, a progressive group focused on supporting candidates in down-ballot races, says it is planning a $10 million investment in left-leaning school and library board candidates in 2024 and 2025. The announcement yesterday, Wednesday, comes amid intensifying battles for school and library boards with conservative campaigns. Conservative is too nice of a word. You know what we call them. The Netroots Radio Style Manual stipulates, Nazis. Well, conservative Nazi campaigns moving to slash funding and restrict education on topics like race and gender. That's not all. Some right-wing groups like Moms for Liberty have already led school board campaigns and signaled plans to increase their electoral efforts. And I got to tell you, this is the way that you punch Nazis. Amanda Littman, co-founder of Run for Something, and I wonder if this is the actual Amanda Littman from the Bay Area that I know, said her organization launched the project after identifying a real hole in the ecosystem on the left, particularly around school and library board races in the electoral space, Amanda Littman said. There are a lot of organizations that do legal fights, she told the Daily Beast, referencing organizations like the ACLU, who has filed recent lawsuits against censorship in schools. There are some organizations that show up at school and library board meetings to protest or speak up. There are some that train volunteers. There is no one actually asking people to run for school board and then helping them do that, meaning on our side. Run for Something is planning a $3 million pilot program for school and library board races in 2024 with the goal of scaling up to $7 million in 2025 and continuing the effort over the next 5 years. School board races will be the program's primary focus. Littman said her organization is currently seeking funding for the campaign, but we feel pretty confident in securing funding. Run for Something's 2023 budget is approximately $16 million, she said. Her group is not the only organization setting its sights on school board races. The conservative 1776 Project PAC launched in 2021 after its founder objected to the way he perceived schools to be teaching about race. That PAC poured approximately $3 million into school board races between its 2021 launch and the November 22 elections. The group told the Wall Street Journal that it had supported 100 candidates who won school board seats. Moms for Liberty, which has spearheaded opposition to discussions of race, gender, and sexuality in schools, told the Journal that it had endorsed 270 candidates in November 2022 races. Approximately half of those candidates won. Of course, let us know that these are not grassroots organizations, the 1776 Project PAC, nor Moms for Liberty. They're funded by the Nazi billionaires that we've referenced previously. Now, conservative candidates fared worse in April school board elections, with most candidates backed by Moms for Liberty or 1776 Project PAC losing their closely watched races in Wisconsin and Illinois. That's because when you punch Nazis, they run poorly. Austin de Dios of the Oregonian brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. When voters elected Tim Hall mayor of Garibaldi in 2021, he joined a small circle of black mayors in Oregon. Following his resignation on September 1st, which he said was spurred by harassment, only 3 black mayors remain across the state's 241 cities. It was against this backdrop on Sunday that Oregon City Mayor Denise McGriff gave an impassioned speech at the 30th anniversary gala in Portland of the Oregon Black Pioneers Historical Society. Now, there are 3 of us, McGriff said. We are the modern-day black pioneers. We need to do more to get more African-American people to run for elected office. That will help us change the demographics in Oregon. Hall, age 68, moved to Garibaldi in 2017, shortly after retiring from the Portland Water Bureau. He said he had experienced pushback from members of the Garibaldi City Council since joining in 2019, but that his relationships grew more hostile when he took office as the city's elected mayor in 2021, and he began looking into Garibaldi's financial history. The city was behind on audits dating to 2018, barring the small coastal city of 833 people from federal and state government grants. Hall said he was concerned about how the city funds were being used. Now, this is a common gambit with newly elected black mayors, and at least we're hearing about it more, in which the city councils don't want their mayor looking into their finances. The black guy can't look into that. Okay, well, during his term, Hall said other city officials tried to deny him some of the mayoral duties, such as selecting a grand marshal for a local parade. Although the choice is a small token of responsibility, it seemed like a sign of disrespect, he said. A small group of former city officials, including former Mayor Judy Riggs, and residents launched a recall petition against Hall in mid-August. Hall pointed to Riggs as one of the biggest forces behind the recall. They collected 120 validated signatures by August 25th. That triggered a 5-day window for Hall to resign or face a recall election. He announced his decision to resign in the Tillamook Headlight Herald on August 29th, saying he wanted to avoid further ugliness and mudslinging. He said he believes his effective removal was partially motivated by race. He said he is the only black man in the city. I love this town, and the people here have been wonderful to me, but the organizers, half of them were bigots, Hall said. The most disappointing thing about this is that they were lying on social media and trying to convince the city I was a villain. Hall also claimed that a man in Garibaldi harassed him and stalked him in his home, making him fear for his family's safety. And I should note, this has been a common occurrence by Proud Boys and Oath Keeper types and 3%ers, etc., 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 here in the state of Oregon. Hall continued, after a while, my wife and kids reminded me that this was a volunteer position. I wasn't getting paid. Even if I won the recall, we didn't feel like the harassment was going to stop. I was bullied out of office. James, a staff writer from the Los Angeles Times, brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Even though California enacted sweeping legislation nearly a decade ago to curb excessive agricultural pumping of groundwater, new research predicts that thousands of drinking water wells could run dry in the Central Valley by the time the law's restrictions take full effect in 2040. The study, published this month in the journal Scientific Reports, casts critical light on how the state is implementing the 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. The research reveals that plans prepared by local agencies would allow for heavy pumping to continue, largely unabated, potentially drawing down aquifers to low levels that would leave many residents with dry wells. The researchers warn that unless local agencies adopt more stringent measures or come up with backup plans, many people in the Central Valley could be left without access to drinking water, and low-income communities could be severely affected. The study's authors reviewed 60 local groundwater plans throughout the Central Valley and examined a key metric called minimum thresholds, the aquifer levels groundwater agencies have set as lower limits while they implement the Groundwater Act's rules and restrictions over the next 16 years. They found that more than 5,000 domestic wells would be left completely dry, while an additional 4,000 households could be partially dewatered, leading to problems such as low water pressure or damaged pumps. In all, they said, more than 9,200 household wells and 1,000 public supply wells could fail if water levels are allowed to decline to the plan's minimum thresholds. Well, that brings us to our break, and I'll need a drink of water after that. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
We're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Donna Phillips. Today we continue our series on civil rights for the Civil Discourse and American Legacy Project. We are joined by special guest Dr. Lester Brooks, American History Professor Emeritus from Anne Arundel Community College. Welcome, Dr. Brooks.
Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. Dr. Brooks, how does Frederick Douglass's speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July," capture the ongoing struggle for civil rights?
Douglass, this was an incredible speech. He wondered, first of all, why he was introduced or invited to speak. And he spoke brilliantly. He was one of the leaders in the fight to bring about emancipation for slaves. And in the speech, he questioned the idea of blacks and July 4th. As far as he was concerned, the July 4th celebration didn't include the enslaved, didn't include blacks, because they weren't benefiting from the Declaration of Independence. And he continually talks about the Declaration of Independence in that speech and how he admires the principles that were placed in, that came out of that Declaration of Independence. So he deeply appreciated them. And as far as he was concerned, he wanted them to be extended. But he did have hope. And that's the good thing, that he did see hope for the future of America.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks.
Thank you.
That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1991. That was the day that members of the Culinary Workers Union Local 226 went out on strike against the Frontier Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. What they did not know was that the strike would last for more than 6 years, becoming one of the longest work actions in U.S. labor history. The Frontier was the second casino to open on the Vegas Strip in 1942. At the time of the strike, the Alardi family owned the historic casino. The Alardis were vehemently anti-union. They renovated the old facility and then reopened, refusing to sign a contract to pay its workers the same rate provided at most other Vegas casinos. Claiming that the Frontier was too small to match the wages of the larger outfits, management refused to budge from their position. In response, Local 226 members mobilized. The year before, Hattie Canty had been elected president of the local. She was a black mother of 10 children and a widow. She had worked as a hotel maid. Her leadership brought a new determination to the Culinary Workers Union. Local 226 set up 24-hour picket lines outside the frontier. The strike was joined by Bartenders Local 165, Teamsters Local 995, the Operating Engineers Local 501, and the Carpenters Local 1780. The strike became an important moment in Vegas labor history, as other casino owners looked on watching the labor battle unfold. The unions stood strong. The picketers' demand that the owners should, quote, sell, shut down, or sign became the call. In the end, the Alardis decided to sell. The new ownership signed a union contract and rehired 280 striking workers. Triumphant union members cut a red ribbon at the hotel to mark their victory.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 45 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of around 75 with sunny conditions throughout the day, winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour, clear skies overnight with lows in the mid-40s, winds out of the northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour, then mainly sunny skies tomorrow, with highs in the upper 70s to low 80s, winds light and variable. Ragweed pollen is rated high here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 17 parts per million, and that daytime UV index has ticked down to level 5, which is in the moderate range. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.07 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 99%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 60 and mostly cloudy with a potential disruption due to rain and flooding. Rome is 83 degrees and partly cloudy. Kabul is 67 and clear. Kyiv is 74 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 85 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 78 with rain. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 50 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees with an air quality alert because of heavy smoke from the wildfires. Chicago, Illinois is 71 degrees and mostly cloudy, and New York, New York is 68 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Ted Anthony of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. South Korea's president sounded a warning to fellow world leaders yesterday, Wednesday, about the recent communication and possible cooperation between North Korea and Russia, saying any action by a permanent UN Security Council member to circumvent international norms would be dangerous and paradoxical. Speaking before the UN General Assembly, Yoon Suk-yeol invoked North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's visit last week to Russia, which is one of the 5 permanent members of the Council, the UN's most powerful body. Kim met with Putin in Russia's Far East. The two said they may cooperate on defense issues, but gave no specifics, which left South Korea and its allies, including the United States, uneasy. It is paradoxical that a permanent member of the UN Security Council, entrusted as the ultimate guardian of world peace, would wage war by invading another sovereign nation and receive arms and ammunition from a regime that blatantly violates Security Council resolutions, Yoon told fellow leaders on the second day of the UN General Assembly's annual gathering of leaders. He had been expected to raise the issue. Yoon said that if North Korea acquires the information and technology necessary to enhance its weapons of mass destruction in exchange for giving conventional weapons to Russia, that would also be unacceptable to the South. South Korea has expressed support for Ukraine, which is fighting a war against the 2022 Russian invasion of its territory. The G20 summit in India earlier this month, Yoon said Seoul, which would contribute $300 million to Ukraine next year and eventually a support package worth more than $2 billion. Foreign experts speculate that Russia and North Korea were pushing to reach arms transfer deals in violation of Security Council resolutions. Both countries are in major disputes with the West, and both are under international sanctions. While Russia-North Korea cooperation is feared to fuel Russia's war efforts in Ukraine, it has also encouraged unease in South Korea, where many think a Russian transfer of sophisticated weapons technologies would help North Korea acquire a functioning spy satellite, a nuclear-powered submarine, and more powerful missiles.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Ashok Sharma of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. India's parliament yesterday, Wednesday, took a major step toward reserving 33% of its seats in its powerful lower house and in state legislatures for women to ensure more equal representation, an issue that had languished for nearly 3 decades because of a lack of consensus among political parties. Sounds familiar? Indian President Draupadi Murmu called the measure the most transformative revolution in our times for gender justice. The Lok Sabha, Parliament's lower house, approved legislation introduced by Prime Minister Modi's government that is expected to boost its image ahead of national elections before next May. An overwhelming 454 members across the political spectrum supported it, and only 2 voted against. However, The measure will not apply to next year's national elections, Home Minister Amit Shah said. The legislation now requires approval of Parliament's upper house and half of the country's 28 state legislatures, which is considered likely. Shah said it will be implemented in the 2029 national elections following a new census and an adjustment of voting districts after next year's elections. India's once-a-decade census was to be held in 2021, but was delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum.